there was a moment beyond the sight of the world, in the heavenly court, where the sons of God gathered before the Lord. Among them stood the accuser, the adversary whose role was to question and challenge the faith of humanity. Then the Lord spoke and asked,
"Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him."
The accuser responded with doubt. "Does Job fear God for nothing? You have surrounded him with protection and blessing. But if you stretch out your hand and take away everything he has, he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord answered, granting a limit to the challenge. Everything Job possessed was placed into the adversary's power, but Job himself was not to be harmed. This permission was not given because Job was guilty of wrongdoing. Rather, heaven allowed a question to be tested, the very question that suffering always seems to raise. Is faith genuine when every blessing disappears? Meanwhile, on earth, the day began peacefully. The sun rose over the land, bread was shared among family, and voices filled the house with the ordinary sounds of life. Job had no idea that a decision had been made in heaven. All he experienced was the quiet comfort of a normal morning. Then the messengers began to arrive. Each one brought worse news than the last. Disaster struck suddenly, and without warning. Possessions were destroyed, servants were killed, and everything Job owned vanished in a devastating sequence of events. The destruction did not unfold slowly. It came with brutal speed. When the final messenger arrived, there were hardly any words left to speak. The losses had become too great to describe. Job stood surrounded by the ruins of the life he once knew. This suffering had not come because he was a wicked man, nor because he had hidden secret sin. Yet the accuser remained determined, and sometimes even the righteous endure suffering without explanation. In the midst of his grief, Job tore his robe and fell to the ground. But instead of cursing God, he worshipped. He acknowledged that everything he once had came from the Lord, and that the Lord had the authority to take it away. Even in loss, he declared that the name of the Lord should still be blessed. But the trial did not end there. Soon, Job's own body was afflicted with painful sores, leaving him in constant agony. Rest became impossible, and his suffering only deepened. Even the voice closest to him urged him to give up, telling him to curse God and die. Yet Job refused to abandon his faith. From the ashes of his pain, he answered with a difficult truth. If people are willing to receive good from God, should they not also accept hardship when it comes? So Job sat in silence, carrying the weight of his grief, while heaven remained quiet. Eventually he spoke again, not to impress anyone, but simply because his pain demanded expression. In his anguish, he cursed the day of his birth and wished that the night he was conceived had never existed. He wondered why his life had begun at all and questioned why he had not died at birth. Soon his friends arrived to comfort him. At first they sat beside him quietly, sharing his sorrow in silence. But eventually they began to speak, and their attempts to explain his suffering turned into accusations. They believed suffering must always be the result of sin. Job defended himself firmly. He insisted that he was innocent and asked them to show him where he had done wrong. If he had sinned, he wanted it named. More than anything, he wanted the Almighty himself to answer him. One of his friends warned him that he was speaking beyond his understanding. After their arguments faded, silence returned once again. For once a man calls directly upon God, only one question remains. Will heaven respond, or will it remain silent? Then, at last, the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. The voice challenged Job's understanding of the world. God asked where Job had been when the foundations of the earth were laid. He spoke of the morning stars singing together and the angels shouting with joy when creation first came into existence. He described the mysteries of nature, the birth of mountain goats, the clouds that bring rain to the earth, the raven searching for food for its young, and the hawk soaring through the sky on wings given to it by its creator. God reminded Job that he governs the stars above and commands the storms. Nothing in creation escapes his knowledge. He sees what is hidden, understands the depths of the earth, and knows the hearts of every human soul. The Lord asked who measured the world and set its boundaries, declaring that his own hand stretched the line that formed creation. In the vast flow of time and the enormous scale of the universe, Job wasn't forgotten. Finally, the Lord addressed him directly. God had heard his cries and now stood before him. When the voice from the whirlwind fell silent, the story did not end. The Lord turned toward Job's friends and rebuked them, explaining that their certainty had not been true wisdom and that their conclusions about Job had been wrong. God instructed them to go to Job and ask him to pray for them. In a powerful reversal, the man who had suffered so deeply became the one who interceded on their behalf. After this, the Lord restored Job's life. What he received was not a payment for suffering, but a gift, a reminder that even after the darkest trials, grace can still appear.